Good morning. So I'm going to read from Luke 23. Luke 24, 1 to 12. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you, while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloth by themselves, and he went home amazed at what had happened. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, we see in the reading that Resurrection Day starts in the dark, starts in the gloom, like every day. It starts in the gloom. But this day is different. According to the gospel account, this day something has changed. Maybe everything has changed. But the women don't know that, not at this point. They're walking through the darkness with spices prepared in grief. We left them Friday, late in the evening, preparing spices, having to rest all day Saturday in despair, up early in the morning with their spices to do the task of mourning. And maybe even here it's just good to pause and remember that faith often starts in the shadows, that newness stirs in the gloom, under the surface, when things still feel old. These women were up walking through the gloom on the first day of the week, when all was due to change. And we should say, at this point in the gloom, that the Easter story, doesn't give us everything we want on Easter Day. We've arrived, especially those of us who know the story well, ready to say, "Hallelujah, Christ is risen." But I'm sure you noticed in the reading, we don't get everything we want. And faith comes to completeness slowly. There's something missing in our text. And in actual fact, I won't even steal all the thunder because you're going to have to wait another week to get the full story. Faith comes to completeness slowly, even on Easter Sunday. We're promised that even on days like today, we still see in a mirror dimly. We still have to follow some signs. We don't get everything. We don't get, in this text, the appearance of Jesus. We have to follow the signs instead. And the first sign of newness is the one we've already been discussing and we've used for our prayers. The first sign of newness is that the stone is rolled away. The stone is rolled away. The tomb is not sealed. A hint, a clue. That the women didn't dwell on very much, but they had access to the tomb. The thing they wanted. And the hint, the sign there may be something like the irreversible gloom and loss is being questioned now. Something has changed. They were expecting a stone barring the way, and it's not there. What does it mean? The second sign is the absence. The second sign is an absence. There is no body. There is no body in the tomb. Jesus is not there. And we note even here, what is faith? Faith is often like that piecing together of, at present, inconclusive clues. Things that can be read both ways. But certainly something has changed. The tomb is no longer sealed. The stone has been rolled away. The body is not there. And then we come to the third sign. The third sign is the angels. Things are getting a little bit more concrete in some senses, with their question and their proclamation. Their question to the women, why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, he is risen. Hallelujah. I don't know if the women got to say hallelujah because they were perplexed. But that's the origin of our chant, of what we say this day. It's probably overload for the women, but that's what they hear. And if you like, it's one of those I told you so moments. Have you ever had one of those? They're kind of like the sweetest things in life, when you get to say to someone, I told you so. I can't dwell on it because normally in our family history, we all have a few I told you so moments, don't you? Claire has some glorious ones, but I just can't bring myself to go into them, where you get to say, I told you so. And that's what the angels have got. I don't know how much of a sense of humour the angels had, but they have that on behalf of Jesus. I told you so. They report to the women Jesus' words that were repeated 3 times in the Gospels. The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the 3rd day be raised again. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? He told you so. He told you so. And when those words were spoken 3 times, strangely enough, or perhaps not so strangely, I don't know, the objection was the scandal of Jesus dying. Do you remember when Jesus said it? And Peter took him to one side. The first time Jesus said this about the Son of Man would be handed over, be badly treated, would be crucified, and then would rise again. Peter took him to one side. Hang on a minute. You won't die. Nobody commented on, what do you mean raised from the dead? It was the death, the scandal of the death. That can't happen. And that's the resurrection bit, no one got to. So I suppose what we could say is that these words of Jesus, this told you so, that the angels bring, it's what makes sense of this question, why do you seek the living among the dead? If these women, the angels are saying, if you had been paying attention to Jesus, this would be the last place you'd be. Jesus told you. This is where Jesus said he wouldn't be on the 3rd day. What are you doing here? Maybe the men had got it right all along, sat at home, not doing anything. And maybe they have a point, these angels, but I have some perplexity here. Because I have a feeling, I don't know whether angels get irony. I've never been up close, I don't know. And I don't really know how they behave around fragile people, and particularly women. I'm not sure how they get women, or fragile people, shepherds as well, because they always start, don't they, when you meet them, they didn't do it here, but they always start with something like, don't be afraid. But of course it's a terrifying situation. Don't be afraid is a completely inappropriate thing. Or I remember the angel saying to Mary, "Hail, O favoured of the Lord," when he's coming to break some pretty big news. And Mary cuts through it all and she gets the point, doesn't she? Because she has her own version of what do you want. You know when someone comes with a big phrase like that, "Oh, hail, wonderful to," what do you want? She gets through it all. That phrase later to other women, "Why are you crying?" There are people who don't get vulnerable people. Often they're called men, but in the text they're called angels. Because what we might want to say is that at a very technical level, the angels are right. The women are in the wrong place. And the question is strongly pertinent. What on earth are you doing looking for the living one among the dead? But in actual fact, at a very human and real level, the women are in the right place. They're there with their spices. They're where they should be. They're certainly in a better place than the men. They are at the tomb with the equipment to grieve. They are piecing together, step by step, the clues that grief is no longer required because newness is unexpectedly happening around them. And again, I wonder if this is a great definition of, or summing up of the experience of faith. That faith is a looking for the living among the dead. Faith is a growing to discern hope in the midst of despair. A piecing together of the clues that newness is happening and is possible, even in the most desperate situations. And that's not simply because things tend to improve. It's not simply because it's spring and everything starts to grow and it's great. But it's because God is close in every circumstance. That God is close in the gloom. That's what Good Friday and Easter tell us. And faith is something like a seeking the living among the dead. Faith is a learning to notice that God gifts life and possibility, salvation in the darkness. It's a looking for the living among the dead. It's a looking for the living God in the formerly closed-in places of our lives and of this world. That's what the women are doing in the tomb, in the formerly closed-in places. They are looking or finding the living God. Faith is squarely looking at the clues that hint that God has been active in the darkness. That we are still living early in the morning on the first day of the week because we are no longer living in the gloom and deathliness of Friday. The women were in the right place, doing the right things, being surprised by the living God. And maybe even the text gives us a hint as to, well, what's the option to this, if these hints can be read both ways or different ways. And maybe the option is to be like the disciples. And Luke does an interesting thing here because he doesn't call them the disciples. He gives them their full-blown title, the apostles. These are the new leaders of the church. And maybe, though, the option to the women's piecing together of clues is to be like the apostles. And they show an alternative to the witness and testimony of the women, that awakening of faith of Mary, Joanna, and the other unnamed sisters. And the alternative, of course, is to stay at home and view it all as idle talk, nonsense, depending on your translation. When they came with the witness, and the witness, they said, well, that doesn't stack up. This is idle talk. And you know, I can imagine this slow to catch on apostles coming up with some mansplaining to these witness women as they heard the story. Slow down a bit, sisters. Slow down a moment. You've misread the clues. Stones don't just roll. The dead stay dead. Angels don't appear. There is no point in looking for the living among the dead. It's understandable, perhaps, given what they'd been through on Friday, that they were resistant to hope. But the fact is, in the end, the clues need following up on. And we all have a question to answer in that. We all piece them together. Was the stone rolled away? Was the body missing? Were angels encountered? Are the women's words nonsense, idle talk, as the apostles think? And you know, faith can't definitively answer all of these objections. It's often a bit of a wrestling with absence, taking notice of clues, waiting for a fuller presence. Because the text we've read today is waiting, isn't it, for a fuller presence. It doesn't give us, the story doesn't give us that presence. We have to wait till next week in the Emmaus Road. And John gets the glory of bringing it in. And I'm not going to give any spoilers. You can read ahead, obviously, but you get it on Sunday. The presence comes, but it also goes as we go beyond that. The resurrection appearances are followed too soon by the ascension account. And then, of course, the Spirit falls. And yet we are told we are still waiting for a fuller presence. But so we are left piecing together these clues offered to us by God, who is at work in the gloom, rolling stones away. And the objections that this is idle talk, this is nonsense, if we follow that, they lead to their own conclusions about the world, about us and about God. If it's all nonsense, then perhaps things are still boxed in. Perhaps there are still few resources available in times of grief, in times of despair, beyond those that we bring and that we generate ourselves, because God isn't there working. But the story doesn't leave us there. It doesn't even just leave us with the witness of the women. The story goes beyond that judgment of the apostles that this is idle talk. It ends instead with Peter and his run to the tomb. In Luke's account, he's running by himself. And it ends with his wondering as he wanders home. He, for some reason, like the others, couldn't dismiss the women's words as nonsense. Perhaps the angel's words struck a chord with him. He was there the first time Jesus said, "The Son of Man must be handed over." He got into an argument, perhaps his first, with Jesus when he heard those words the first time. He had that stinging reproof from Jesus, "Get behind me, Satan." I imagine those days were etched in his mind. Whatever the reason, he runs to the tomb. And he starts piecing together the clues for himself, noting that the stone was indeed rolled away, that the body was not there, awaiting that fuller encounter still than he has. He starts to seek the living among the dead, to spy life pushing up through the arid deathliness of the world around him. And the text leaves us with this: he wonders, he marvels, he is amazed. He hasn't got it all yet, but he's starting to wonder. He wonders because he entertains a world that in God's grace shimmers again with newness. Easter, the resurrection, is already doing its work in Peter. Christ is risen. Hallelujah. We're going to sing